Hi guys, Robbo46 here and welcome to the race results and analysis for Sunday's dramatic MotoGP race at Argentina. Now to start off with, Michelin have had some more issues with their rear tyre. Unfortunately it happened to Scott Redden this time on his Ducati. His part of his rear tyre actually exploded much like Baz's did. However, luckily the inside of the tyre stayed intact, so Scott didn't actually crash. But as you can see, the rear of the bike was completely destroyed by the tyre exploding. And yeah, Scott was definitely lucky not to crash with that one. So Michelin, to begin with, decided they were going to withdraw the tyres and use a safety tyre for the race. And MotoGP guys were meant to have an extended warm-up session in the morning, about half an hour, so that they could try out the new tyres. However, it decided to rain, so they had to go on wet tyres. But it stopped raining and the track was slowly drying out, which meant that Michelin had to make the decision of the riders not being able to use the safety tyre because they've never used it before. So the riders had to use the tyres that weren't that safe, and they obviously didn't want to risk another blowout because obviously that's the second one that's happened now. So they decided to split the race, reduce the laps down to 20, and the riders had to make a mandatory pit stop on either laps 9, 10 or 11 to switch bikes and switch tyres because the tyres couldn't do any more laps than that. And they obviously didn't want to risk that because obviously the rider's safety is paramount. And that was that. So it was Marc Marquez on pole position, followed by Valentino Rossi in second and Jorge Lorenzo in third. The lights went out. Marquez got a good start. Lorenzo got a pretty good start, but Rossi didn't get the best of starts. Pulled a little wheelie, and he had a little slide with the rear of his bike. Nothing as dramatic as like Pole did in a practice start at Qatar, but just enough to lose a bit of time. But into the first corner, a bit of action going on straight away. Andrea Iannone went in pretty tight, and on the brakes his front end was juddering away, and he actually clipped the rear of Marc Marquez, dislodging Marquez's rear onboard camera. And Marquez didn't go down, he stayed on, but Iannone went wide and pushed Danny Pedrosa really wide. But it was Dovi who was leading the way at that point, followed by Lorenzo and Rossi. Rossi got in front of Lorenzo pretty swiftly, and Dovi was looking good. Marquez made his way past Lorenzo as well, and then made his way past Rossi, and then caught Dovi and got past him pretty quick as well, and then Rossi got past Dovi, and Rossi started hunting down Marquez because Marquez had about a second lead by that point, but Rossi he was catching him, and it was looking like it was going to be a repeat of 2015 Argentina race with Marquez in the lead and Rossi right behind him. Rossi tried to have a few attempts at overtaking, but not so successful. One of his overtakes, he got past Marquez at turn 4 because the Honda was making all kinds of shapes coming out of that onto the back straight and losing a hell of a load of drive. Rossi got past, but unfortunately outbraked himself come the next turn, and Marquez got back underneath. Crutchlow and Alicia Spargo had a crash at the same time at the same corner. Both hit damp patches, both lost the front at turn 1, and down they went. But they did decide to carry on their race on foot before rejoining the race on their bikes. Yoni Hernandez, his weekend was going from bad to worse. In qualifying, Loris Baz actually noticed that Hernandez's wheels weren't aligned properly, so Yoni was struggling to ride that. Obviously went into the pits, changed one of the tyres, but that didn't solve it. So Didn't go too well for him, and then he had a mechanical failure with his Aspar Ducati. Jack Miller, after 3 laps, he suffered a crash, and then after 5 laps into the first corner, actually it's more like coming out of the first corner, Jorge Lorenzo, the championship leader, the reigning world champion, he suffered a front end crash on his M1 Yamaha. He had a crash into turn 1 in one of the free practices, but this time was coming out. He just hit a damp patch coming out, and that was it. Game over. He didn't really look that disappointed with it, to be honest, but yeah, there is some rumours going around about where he may be moving to, but I'll leave that for a different video. And at the front, Marquez and Rossi were still battling ferociously. Maverick Vinales had caught up to Dovi and Iannone, who were battling, and started battling with the 2 Ducatis. And Vinales was looking good, but Marquez and Rossi had quite a big gap over those guys. It was about 3 to 4 seconds. And then they had to come in to change bikes, and that's where it all changed. Marquez came in first. Vinales and the 2 Ducatis decided to pit on lap 9, whereas Rossi and Marquez decided to pit on lap 10. In they went, Rossi right on the tail of Marquez, and I mean literally right on the tail of him. We know that Marquez is good at changing bikes, probably the quickest out there because he doesn't touch the floor, he just jumps from one bike to the other. Rossi, not one of the quickest at changing bikes, obviously puts one of his feet on the floor, he doesn't jump from one bike to the other. But Lorenzo and Rossi did do some practice bike swaps in free practice and warm up. But yeah, as they exited pit lane, Rossi had lost bugger all time behind Marquez. It was nothing. But as they exited the pit, you could see in the distance that the 2 Ducatis and Vinales obviously done a lap on the tyres, had a lap under the belt with the tyres, and they weren't that far away. But Marquez shot out the pits and got ahead of Rabat, who was actually in second place because he hadn't pitted yet. And Rossi, unfortunately, slotted behind Rabat and couldn't get past him for a little bit. So by this time, Marquez was pulling away. The 2 Ducatis and the Suzuki were closing in. Eventually, Rossi did get past Rabat, and then Rabat pitted. But Rossi wasn't looking good on the bike. He didn't look anywhere near as quick as what he did on his first bike. But just going back to the pits, Bautista actually had a crash in the pits. He went into the pits as normal, missed his braking guide to stop next to his bike, and actually lost the front and took one of his mechanics out. Luckily, his mechanic only suffered a sprained knee, but definitely lucky to get away with that one. It did look quite nasty. Bautista did get on his second bike and carry on racing. Yeah, back to the front, Rossi was definitely struggling. He was going about a second a lap slower than Marquez. Marquez looked more comfortable on his second bike than he did his first bike. Rossi looked less comfortable on his second bike than he did his first bike, saying that he had problems with the rear and he couldn't get the bike stopped. He did run wide a hell of a lot, and this meant that Vinales, who had now got past both Ducatis, was closing in on Rossi, as were the 2 Ducati riders of Iannone and Dovi. Vinales tried a couple of attempts to overtake Rossi, but Rossi managed to re-overtake Vinales, and then disaster for Vinales into the first corner. He lost the front, hit a small damp patch, a bit like Lorenzo, but earlier on in the corner, and unfortunately he went down. Scott Redding, what can you say about this guy? Didn't have any luck whatsoever. Obviously, rear tyre exploded in free practice, and he had a mechanical failure with his Ducati. He tried restarting the bike several times, but it had no power whatsoever. He could have been on the podium. He was looking really good, but unfortunately, It wasn't meant to be. His Ducati cut out, and that was his race over as well. Loris Baz as well. He ended up crashing out of the race earlier on, just after the pits. But yeah, so Vinales was out, and the two Ducatis were now starting to close right in on Valentino Rossi. Pedrosa was in a lonely 5th place at this point. The two Ducatis caught up to Rossi, and Iannone made the first pass. Rossi got him back, and then Iannone made a pretty aggressive move that pushed both himself and Rossi really wide, which meant that Dovi managed to get past both of them in one corner, and Iannone got back in front of Rossi, and it was Marquez who took the win. But it was all drama a bit further back. Rossi just not being able to cling on to the back of the Ducatis. However, on the second to last corner, Iannone decided to try and shove up his Ducati up the inside of Dovi, a bit like what Crutchlow done to him 12 months ago. And unfortunately for Iannone, he lost the front going into the corner and actually took out his own teammate Dovizioso, which meant that Rossi actually inherited 2nd place and finished 2nd. Danny Pedrosa, who was in a lonely 5th, he actually ended up taking 3rd place because of that collision. Eugene Laverty on the Aspar Ducati, he was top Ducati. He finished the day in 4th place. He scored as many points in this race as he did in the whole of last season. Hector Barbera was up next in 5th place, followed by Pol Espargaro. Barbera and Pol actually had a collision a bit earlier on in the race with Eugene Laverty just behind him, which actually sent Pol off onto the grass and made Hector go wide as well. But that's when Laverty managed to get past him. So Hector Barbera was 5th, Pol Espargaro 6th. Stefan Bradl on the Aprilia, he ended in 7th, ahead of Bradley Smith, who was 8th. Tito Rabat, he got 9th place. Avera Bautista, even though he had a crash in the pit lane, he ended in 10th. Alicia Spargaro was 11th. Michele Pirro, the wild card, or the replacement rider rather, for Petrucci, he ended in 12th. And Andrea Dovizioso, he actually pushed his bike across the line and ended up in 13th. Cal Crutchlow, he also crashed again on the final lap and didn't actually get to finish the race. It was definitely a dramatic race for MotoGP. What would have happened if they didn't have to change tyres? Who knows? But it is Marc Marquez who leads the championship now with 41 points, followed by Rossi, who's now 2nd with 33 points, and Pedrosa, who is 3rd with 27 points. 2 points behind him is Jorge Lorenzo, who won the first race. But there are a few riders who have yet to score points yet. Andrea Iannone obviously crashed out the first race and crashed out the second race, as did Cal Crutchlow, Loris Baz as well, and Yoni Hernandez. But you can be sure that those riders will score many points throughout the season. Anyway guys, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave this video a like, subscribe to my channel for more content. I shall see you guys in the next video. See you!